Morningstar International Editor Steve Sweeney, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, lovely. Thanks. It's great to be here again.
Thank you. So you have visited Kurdistan lately, especially
Mhm.
Makhmour camp and Quandil. KDP is positioning troops to PKK areas. So what was
Yeah.
your impression? Do you think a war likely to happen? What do you think KDP is aiming with that actions?
Well, I think there's certainly tensions have been raised across Kurdistan, and that was very apparent when during my visit there. I was, like you said, I was in Kandil, and recently we've had news that the KDP affiliated, so that's the Barzani clan affiliated Peshmerga forces have mobilized to the area. And this is kind of ahead of what is perceived to be potentially a move or a war against the PKK guerrilla in the Kandil Mountains region. Now, earlier this week, there was a report which purported to be by the Kurdistan Regional Security Council, which is part of the regional government, which said that they had made an arrest or arrested 17 suspected PKK terrorists, as they called them, that were plotting a series of attacks on businesses, diplomatic missions, government buildings, this kind of thing. Now, this was obviously a very serious allegation to make, but somebody from the council's made up of five people. Three of them are from the Patriotic Union of Kurdistan (PUK), and two of them are from the KDP. Now, it was leaked actually from a source. I wrote about it in the Morning Star this week. That actually that report turned out to be a fake. It was that the PUK members of the committee knew nothing of the allegations, and the PKK themselves dismissed the claims as absurd. But what it was, I think, aimed at doing is softening up public opinion to say, look, this is the threat that we're facing at the moment, to justify an attack in Kandil. And we have to say that when I visited Kandil, the people there, these are. According to President Erdogan, there are no civilians that live there. They're just terrorists. And he thinks it's just full of PKK bases. But the reality is very different, of course. There's about 20,000 people live there in villages and other kinds of settlements. Most of them are agricultural workers. I met shopkeepers. I mean, there's children there, doing what children do, running around and playing. So this is a civilian area. Let's make no mistake about that. That's what it is. And I met the victims of Turkish bombing missions there. Now, Operation Claw Eagle was supposed to have finished in September. This is there. I think it started in June or July, but it was there. Again, a mission ostensibly against the PKK, but it wasn't. It was targeted the civilian population, and I met at least five families who had were victims of Turkish bombing raids, and they were very clear that this is still going on. Every night the drones are flying overhead, and every time they hear an aircraft, they're in fear of their lives. They said they go to sleep every night and pray that they're not going to be killed in their sleep. So the war there is very real, but it's escalating. Like I said, now with this, the KDP are known to be working with Turkish intelligence services. There's talk of a military base or intelligence base being built in Kandil as well. But you have to look at the bigger picture and what's happening more broadly, particularly in the region. So, as you said, I visited Makhmour. And the refugee camp, it's home to 12,000 people, and but it's subjected to a blockade, which is imposed by the KDP, and this means that people are unable to leave the camp, and people are unable to get into the camp. So it's causing incredible difficulties. The camp is also targeted by Turkish airstrikes, quite recently as well. There was an incident where chemical weapons were believed to have been used.
You have published a very important article on Morningstar about the Makhmour refugee camp and the COVID situation in there as well. So could you please give us more
Yeah.
details and updates from the camp?
Well, yeah, I mean, just coming onto the camp. So, like I said, it's been subjected to Turkish airstrikes. There's still drones flying overhead, pretty much most nights. I was there for 7 nights, 8 days. I think I was in the camp, and we could hear the drones constantly flying overhead. And it's a camp that is run along self-sufficient lines. So it's the camp that's run along the ideas of democratic confederalism as the ideology of Abdullah Öcalan. And this, I think, is why it's being targeted by the KDP. The United Nations have also withdrawn their support for the camp, and this comes at a time when there's a deadly outbreak of COVID-19. Now, we suspected when I was there, which was earlier this month, that coronavirus was present in the camp, and it was confirmed about a few days after I left Kurdistan that there was indeed an outbreak there. And there's reported when I last spoke to the doctors at the clinic there, they had 5 people struggling for their lives, but they believed around 19 people with coronavirus. Of course, this is impossible for them to gauge because they have no test or track or tracing system, no testing equipment. At the clinic, they had about 20 boxes. That was the entirety of the equipment to deal with the COVID-19 outbreak for all the staff that work at the clinic. They're all volunteers, by the way. They don't get paid. Excuse me. And they have no PPE. They have no oxygen, no ventilators. They have very short on basic things like masks, hand wash, oxygen. They have no ventilators, so they're really poorly equipped to deal with this. And the situation is being exacerbated by a blockade. Now, I challenge this because the KDP have imposed this blockade because of the killing of what is a Turkish intelligence agent in Erbil, the regional capital, last July. And they said that they needed to impose the blockade for security reasons. Now, under international law, it would count as collective punishment, which is illegal. So, but the United Nations have denied that there is a blockade. They denied any knowledge of a blockade. The United Nations denied that they had knowledge of a Turkish airstrike, despite this being all over the international press, despite the Turkish armed forces actually admitting that they'd done it. They did it, but they said that they were targeting terrorists. So the situation's pretty, on the one hand, it's pretty dire in the camp. There's a lack of basic infrastructure. The NGOs are very reluctant to go there because they've been pressured by Turkey, who spread what they described as black propaganda. And this was, the Turkish state is leaning on the NGOs, saying that this is an incubator of terrorism, and that the only people in the camp are terrorists, and we can't guarantee your safety, if you enter the camp. And so they're completely adrift of any kind of support. So that was one of the key things that they asked for, that the people in the camp, the health commission, the education commissions, the co-chairs of the camp were, they appealed for international support and solidarity because, like I said in the previous question, I said that you can't see all of these things separately. So the troops gathered in Quandil, the blockade of Makhmour are deliberate, as is, and you tie it in with the recent security deal that's been signed behind the backs of the Yazidi people in Şengöl between Erbil and Baghdad, this security arrangement, which means that they want to take control of Şengöl, and they've even imposed their own mayor, who's been living outside of the country for 7 years, and doesn't really know the area, isn't really connected with the day-to-day issues. But of course, Şengöl is what they're trying to do is a number of things. They want to break the influence of the PKK. Of course, PKK were the people that liberated both Şengöl and Makhmour when they were overrun by ISIS. Particularly in the case of Şengöl, the KDP fled the area. The Peshmerga forces fled the area, apparently under the order of Barzani, who wanted to mobilize the forces to protect Kirkuk, which again now, that situation's changed quite dramatically. But in Iraq, there are the contested areas, which are part of Article 140, which is the areas where they're not quite sure whether the areas belong to Iraqi Kurdistan or come under the control of Baghdad. But what I think they're trying to do is, if you look at the geographical position, is create like a Sunni corridor. So they're trying to take over control of places like Shengul, Makhmour, Kirkuk, Mosul, and to essentially to split the movement and to split the Kurds in Syria from the Kurds in Iraq and Iran. And I think that's a deliberate ploy, backed by the US, of course, backed by US imperialism, backed by Turkey, backed by Baghdad, and backed by the forces of imperialism. And they're trying to to break the progressive ideology. And I think that's why Makhmour presents a problem for them, because Makhmour, as I said, is run along the ideas of democratic confederalism and the ideas of Abdullah Öcalan, and this whole the system that they operate there is a self-sufficient system society with a grassroots democracy. With elected co-chairs. They have direct democratic input into health, into education, into the municipality. They have the primacy of women is with the Ishtar committee, which is the women's organisation there, with the primacy of women. As you'd expect an organisation running along the ideas of Abdullah Öcalan, but it offers a very different way of running society, and this, of course, poses a direct threat to the power and the rule, the entrenched rule of the Barzanis and the KDP in particular. So Makhmour is something that probably frightens them quite a lot as well, because if those ideas spread, then it becomes a direct challenge to to their power. So if you look at the whole dynamic, and of course Turkey is pulling the strings in many ways, and this is precipitating its war not only in Iraq and Iraq and Iran, but it's also paving the way for further attacks and deeper attacks in Afrin and occupied the occupied areas of northern Syria.
You have mentioned Mr. Öcalan's ideas, and you have experienced the Makhmour refugee camp as well. Very short, very briefly, do you think Öcalan is the key for peace and sustainability in the region?
Well, I think yes. I mean, I think that's very apparent. And if you spend any time in Kurdistan, the thing that really struck me was, when I spoke to people and I said to them, "Well, what's the what can we do in Britain when I go back? What is people will ask me the same this kind of questions is what can we do to help?" So I asked this along the lines of what can we do practically and what can we do politically, and practically they spoke about, people were talking about, for example, in Makhmour they were talking about, well, we need help with medical supplies and aid to help deal with the coronavirus. We need support with the schools. We need material to help us teach and this kind of thing, and to build the new schools and to build the new hospitals. So that was the practical side. But politically, I think almost everybody that I spoke to, whether it was in Makhmour, whether it was in Quandil, whether it was in Slimani, the overriding message was, well, yes, what we need you to do is step up the campaign for the freedom of Abdullah Öcalan. I was at a demonstration in Slimani calling for the freedom for Abdullah Öcalan. So it's very obvious that when it's very obvious to me that Abdullah Öcalan is the leader of the Kurdish people. This is he's somebody that's been in prison for more than 20 years now, and the longer that he's in prison, the longer the war continues. And I think that his freedom is absolutely essential in bringing what they want is a peaceful solution to the Kurdish question in Syria, in Turkey, in Iran, and in Iraq. So his freedom is absolutely key to that, but also the wider kind of issue of bringing peace and stability to the Middle East. So I think it's absolutely essential, and it's the right thing to do is to step up the campaign for his freedom.
Do you have any other messages from the region?
Yeah, well, the other sort of key message really was Britain's involvement in supporting what Turkey are doing in the region. And I met when I was in Kurdistan. I went to Kunamasi, which is a holiday resort. It's one of the most popular tourist spots in the region, actually, and it draws visitors. There were people that had come up from Basra when I was there, and people from Baghdad. So not just from the Kurdistan region, but across Iraq attend there. Now, during the summer, this resort was targeted in an airstrike by the Turkish state. I was there. I saw the devastation that it caused, and I listened to the nephew of a family that were injured in the in that particular blast. He was there at the time, and it was very traumatic what he was describing. It was just an ordinary kind of summer's day when tourists were there, and he was going around collecting money from people at their spot when the missile struck. But I did meet the family of that airstrike. They were in Slimani, and Payman, who's she's the woman. She had her leg blown off, and she's covered in burns. Her husband had, I think, about 9 injuries from shrapnel, and and they struggle at the moment. They had to give up work. They're unable to work. Their children are traumatized and have psychological damage from because of the attack. And they said their lives changed forever that day, and they're left with they have to pay for their own treatment as well. So they've got I think for a prosthetic leg it's going to cost around $100,000, they said, and this can't be carried out inside Kurdistan. She has to fly to leave to get this prosthetic leg, and they were a very, very humble family. But what they said was that that Britain and the British government don't care. The British government only thinks about its profit by selling weapons to Turkey, which they're then used in airstrikes such as this one targeting civilians. And they were saying that there's a human cost to their actions. I met similar in Quandil. I met about 5 families. All of them had. I met one woman who said that her mother was praying at 4 o'clock in the morning. And when the air attack happened, she said she went into the room where her mother was and she found her cut in half in the attack. She showed me the fragment of a bomb that had killed her entire family, her aunties, her uncles, her sisters, and I think she lost 7 members of her family in this airstrike. I met a Kurdish farmer who had been horrifically disfigured as a result of a bombing, and again unable to work. This was a pattern. I met about 5 families like this, and they all said the same thing, that that Britain has a responsibility here. They blame Britain just as much as they blame Turkey. They blame NATO, and they said Britain must stop selling arms to Turkey, and they must stop propping up the Turkish regime of Tayyip Erdogan. That was a very, very clear message from them.
Morning Star International editor Steve Sweeney, thanks for joining us. Thank you for your comments and updates from Kurdistan today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
Thank you.